You don't need a Halloween costume. You're scary enough already, my son laughed. And that was the moment I knew. I wouldn't let them sleep under my roof ever again. The morning started with cinnamon and clean towels. I'd been up since 6, airing out the guest room, folding the napkins just right, checking the porch light bulb for the 10th time. They were due to arrive by noon. My son, his wife, and their 2 little monsters. I mean that with love, or I used to. Halloween had always been their favorite holiday. Costumes, photos, noise, so much noise. I even baked those pumpkin cookies with the little chocolate eyes they liked when they were younger, though no one ever asked me to. The dough stuck to my fingers more than it used to. My joints don't always cooperate these days, but I powered through. I wanted it to be nice. There was a time when these visits filled me with joy. Now, I brace myself. My son, Dean, is 42 now. Works in some tech company I never quite understood. Lives in a house 3 times bigger than mine. Drives a car that parks itself. He never says it outright, but he carries himself like he's upgraded from me. You can feel it in his eyes, that distance. Like he's doing charity by stopping in once a season. Laura, his wife, is polite enough. Cold, but polite. She's always tapping away at her phone, making sure the world knows what a perfect family she has. I suspect I don't fit that aesthetic. And the kids, Jesse and Milo, are teenagers now. Taller than me, louder than I remember children being, always with some device in their hands. They used to run into my arms. Now they grunt a greeting, grab snacks, and disappear into their own orbit. Still, I put out the good plates. I ironed the tablecloth. I even dusted the ceramic witch figurine Dean made in 3rd grade. I tell myself, that's for me. But it's not. It's Hope, plain and tired. They arrived late, of course. Dean didn't knock, just let himself in with the key I gave him years ago. "Hey, Mom," he called out, carrying 2 duffel bags and a pumpkin-shaped candy bucket. Laura followed with a suitcase on wheels, not bothering to look up from her screen. The kids barged in last, already arguing about who got the bedroom with the better Wi-Fi signal. I smiled. That's what I do. I smiled and hugged each of them, even when they barely returned it. "Everything's ready," I said. I made cookies. "Aw, Grandma's still baking," Jessie muttered, already halfway up the stairs. Dean kissed my cheek distractedly. "Thanks for letting us crash here." Crash, that's what they call it. Like I'm a cheap motel on the way to somewhere better. We had chili for dinner, my late husband's recipe. No one touched it but me and Milo, who dumped half a bottle of hot sauce into his bowl. The rest picked at the bread. Dean scrolled on his phone while eating. Laura was planning tomorrow's schedule for the costume contest downtown. Everything had to be photogenic. Afterward, I offered to watch a movie with them. Something cozy. "Maybe the old Frankenstein?" Dean snorted. "God, you still watch that? Mom, that thing is ancient." I kept my voice light. "So am I, dear." He laughed. "You don't need a Halloween costume. You're scary enough already." He didn't even look up as he said it. It was a throwaway line, a cheap joke, but Laura chuckled. Even Jessie smirked. Milo looked unsure, but said nothing. I sat there, with an empty plate in front of me, and felt something settle into place, like a drawer finally sliding shut after years of sticking. They stayed up late, talking loudly, making plans. I went to my room and stared at the ceiling. By midnight, I'd made up my mind. I wouldn't be their background anymore. They were still asleep when I got up. The house was quiet, except for the occasional creak of the floorboards and the distant hum of the furnace kicking in. I stood in the hallway for a moment, listening. The guest room door was closed. Laura had hung her silk robe over it, pale pink, monogrammed. I'd bought that door 40 years ago with Derek when we added the room after Dean was born. Funny how time turns everything inside out. I went to the kitchen, started the coffee, and sat at the table without turning on the light. I didn't want warmth or comfort. I just wanted stillness. I needed to think. Throwing them out in the middle of the night sounded dramatic, emotional. But it wasn't. It wasn't even anger, really. It was something older, heavier, like a knot I'd stopped trying to untangle finally giving way. I wasn't planning a speech. I wasn't crafting a moment. I just knew I couldn't share a roof with people who could laugh at me and not see the harm. They'd outgrown me. That's what they'd say if they were being honest. Or maybe I'd fallen behind. That's more their language. But either way, they didn't see me anymore. Not as a person. Not as someone whose feelings had weight. I was the soft old frame around their perfect picture. I'd made that picture possible. They just forgot to say thank you. At 7 a.m., I started pulling their things from the guest room. I didn't throw anything, didn't tear a stitch. I folded Laura's robe, zipped the suitcase, placed Jesse's makeup bag on top like I'd done it 100 times. Dean's shaving kit was on the bathroom sink. I put it next to his bag, quietly, like I was packing him for college again. By 7:30, everything they brought was lined up in the hallway, neat as pins. Dean came downstairs first, rubbing his eyes. "You're up early," he muttered, glancing toward the kitchen. I stayed seated. "You need to go," I said simply. He blinked, not processing. "Go? What do you mean?" "I mean you, all of you. You can't stay here tonight. You need to find a hotel." He stared at me like I'd spoken in another language. "Mom, what are you talking about?" "I heard what you said last night," I said. "And I saw how none of you thought it was wrong." He ran a hand through his hair. "Oh, come on. That was a joke." "I'm not laughing," I said. He exhaled hard. "It was just Halloween talk. Everyone was joking." "You weren't, and neither was I. I've made a home for you every time you've needed it. I've kept the door open, the lights on, the food warm, and you come in, insult me in my own kitchen, and laugh like I'm invisible." Laura appeared in the hallway, robe back on, mascara smudged under one eye. "What's going on?" "Your bags are packed," I said. "I'll call you a cab if you need one." Her mouth opened slightly, as if she might argue, then closed again. She glanced at Dean. He looked stunned, like someone had pulled the floor out from under him. "Mom, it's not that serious." "It is," I said. "I've spent years excusing your tone, ignoring the way you look at me like I'm something you outgrew. I forgave it, because that's what mothers do. But I'm done. I'm 65, not 105. I still see, still feel, and I'm not going to be laughed at in my own home." Jessie came down the stairs, phone in hand. "Are we leaving?" she asked, half awake, half bored. "You are," I said, standing. Laura touched Dean's arm. "Let's just go. We can get a room at the Marlowe." He still didn't move. "You're kicking us out over a joke?" "No," I said. "I'm asking you to leave because you don't see me as someone who deserves respect. That's not a joke." The silence was thick. Even Jessie put her phone down. No one cried. No one apologized. Dean muttered something under his breath, but I didn't ask him to repeat it. They gathered their things. Laura called a rideshare. The kids didn't say goodbye. Dean gave me one last look, a mix of confusion and hurt pride, and then stepped out the door. It closed behind them like a punctuation mark. Not anger, not revenge, just the end of something. The silence after they left wasn't peaceful. It was loud. It echoed through the rooms they'd occupied, bounced off the kitchen tiles, filled the narrow hallway like smoke. I stood by the front door for a while, not moving, just breathing. Their scent was still in the air. Laura's perfume, that synthetic sugar one, Jesse's hairspray, the faint trace of Dean's aftershave, same one Derek used to wear. Strange how your body remembers before your heart does. I didn't cry. I went back into the kitchen, poured the coffee I'd let grow cold. I drank it black. No toast, no eggs. Just the weight of a quiet I hadn't felt in years. The dishes were still in the sink. 4 plates, 2 half-full bowls, 3 glasses, a fork dropped under the table. I stood there looking at it all like it belonged to another house. I didn't rush to clean it. Let it sit. Let it rot a little. Maybe that's what it needed. The garbage bag was already full, so I took it out to the can by the porch. That's when I saw the footprints in the frost on the steps. Long, narrow treads from Dean's shoes. The kids' smaller ones crisscrossed on the concrete. I stared at them for a long time. The morning sun would melt them soon, and that felt fitting. Nothing lasts. I came back inside and sat in the old chair by the window. Derek's chair, really, though it's been mine longer now. The cushion had flattened just the way I like it. There's an indent from my right hip and a soft spot in the armrest where I used to rest the crossword puzzle. Derek used to joke it would mold to me completely if I sat still long enough. He'd have hated last night. He wasn't sentimental, my Derek, but he had a quiet way of protecting people, especially me. He wouldn't have let Dean talk to me like that. He would have stood, said one low word, and that would have been the end of it. That man didn't need volume to be heard. But he's not here. Hasn't been for 8 years. And in those 8 years, I let a lot slide. More than I should have. I thought if I kept saying yes, if I kept baking the cookies and offering the guest room, eventually Dean would come back to me. The real Dean, the boy who used to draw me birthday cards and cry when he lost his toy dinosaur. But somewhere between promotion number 3 and the move to the suburbs, he misplaced me. And I let him. I let them all. It's not like the movies, you know. When people take a stand, the music swells and the lighting changes and they suddenly feel empowered. I didn't feel powerful. I felt tired, hollowed out. But there was also something clean in that space. Like a scab finely peeled, revealing the new skin underneath. Raw, but healing. Around 10, the phone rang. I didn't pick up. I recognized Dean's number. The call went to voicemail. Then a message came through. Mom, what the hell? Call me. That was it. No sorry, no, are you okay? Just outrage dressed up as confusion. I turned the phone over, screen down. A few minutes later, another message. We didn't mean it like that. You're overreacting. I laughed, not loudly, not bitterly. Just a short, dry sound that startled even me. It's always the same. When you quietly give, they take. When you finally say enough, they call you dramatic. I stood up and started moving, slow at first, then with purpose. I opened the linen closet and began folding the spare blankets. Took the extra pillows, the air mattress they'd used when Jessie brought her boyfriend last Thanksgiving, and shoved them into the attic. Boxed up the Halloween decorations. All those plastic pumpkins and glitter skulls they liked so much, and taped the lid shut. I wasn't angry. I was clearing space. For what? I wasn't sure yet. At noon, the doorbell rang. I didn't answer. The doorbell rang again. Short, impatient bursts. Not the kind you use with someone you respect. The kind you use with a delivery driver you think is taking too long. I stayed in the kitchen, watching the steam rise from my tea. I wasn't going to give them another stage to perform on. Eventually, the bell stopped. A car door slammed outside. Tires crunched over the driveway gravel. Silence returned like a blanket, heavy but warm. I sat down, folded my hands in my lap, and waited for the shaking in them to stop. I wasn't scared. I wasn't unsure. But even truth has its tremors. At some point, I must have fallen asleep in Derek's chair. The sun had shifted across the floor by the time I opened my eyes, casting long shadows from the window frame. My neck ached. My knees cracked when I stood. That's when I noticed the envelope slipped under the door. Thick paper. Heavy. My name written in Dean's sharp, slanted handwriting. I didn't open it. Not right away. I made myself a sandwich, cleaned the counters, watered the orchid by the sink. Only then, with clean hands and steady breath, did I open it. It wasn't an apology. Of course not. It was a letter full of explanations. Reasons. Childhood memories he thought would soften me. A paragraph about stress. Another about miscommunication. Not once did he say, "I hurt you." Only, "You misunderstood me." There was a check inside, too. $300. No note, just the check. As if pain could be itemized. I put it all back in the envelope and slid it into the drawer by the phone. The one I used to keep stamps and pens in, back when people still wrote letters that mattered. That drawer was full of other small betrayals. A Christmas card without a signature, a birthday coupon someone forgot to activate, a photo of the kids with me cropped out. I sat at the table and wrote my own letter. No greetings. No warm-up. Dean, this is not a misunderstanding. This is not about stress or timing or Halloween jokes. This is about a lifetime of you talking over me, around me, but never to me. You hurt me. That night wasn't new. It was just the final straw. I've cooked for you, made space for you, opened my home every time you needed convenience. But I've learned something. Love that comes only when I'm useful isn't love. You are my son. I will always care for you, but I won't chase you. I won't shrink myself to make you feel bigger. Don't come back until you learn how to knock. Mom, I didn't sign with love. Not because I didn't feel it, but because love, if it's real, doesn't need a ribbon. I folded the letter, placed it in an envelope, sealed it with a strip of tape. I didn't own any stamps anymore. I'd have to walk to the post office in the morning. Later that evening, I opened the closet in the hallway, the one with the winter coats. Behind the coats, behind the box of Christmas lights and wrapping paper, there was a tin. Inside the tin, papers. Bank statements. A will Derek and I wrote together before his second surgery. A power of attorney form. My signature, no one else's. I took out the will and placed it on the table. Dean was still listed as primary beneficiary. The house, the savings, everything. I stared at it for a long time. Then I picked up the phone and called my lawyer. The morning after I called the lawyer, the house felt different. Not bigger, not cleaner, just mine. There were no duffel bags in the hallway, no teenage voices shouting from upstairs, no smell of hairspray or that strange frozen breakfast Laura always microwaved in the morning. Just coffee, real silence, and the sound of my slippers on the tile floor. I didn't make a full breakfast. No need to. I scrambled one egg, toasted half a slice of bread, and ate slowly, watching the blue jays outside the window fight over the feeder. They'd knocked it over again. Derek used to joke they were nature's drunks, loud, greedy, unapologetic. After breakfast, I pulled out the letter I wrote to Dean and slipped it into my coat pocket. I bundled up, the cold was sharper than I expected, and walked down Maple Avenue to the post office. It's not a long walk, but my knees complained the whole way. Still, I didn't mind. There was something steadying about being out on the sidewalk, among people who didn't know me, who weren't expecting anything from me but a nod or a step to the side. The woman at the counter recognized me. "Sending something special, Karen?" she asked, weighing the envelope. "Something necessary," I said. She smiled like she understood, though I doubt she did. When I came back home, the answering machine was blinking. 2 new messages. First one: "Mom, can we talk? I think we need to talk." Second one: "I'm sorry if you felt hurt. That wasn't my intention. Can we put this behind us?" I didn't delete them. Not yet. But I didn't answer either. Some silences aren't punishments. They're boundaries. The rest of the day I spent in the garden. My garden was half dead, honestly. Neglected since Derek passed. We used to tend it together. He'd weed. I'd prune. After he died, I trimmed the roses out of habit, but the joy had left it. Today, I dug. I cleared the corner by the fence where the ivy had taken over. Ripped it out by the root. I cut back the hydrangeas that hadn't bloomed in 2 years. I found Derek's old gardening gloves and wore them until the leather cracked. It felt good to sweat, to ache from something that wasn't emotional. Around 3 p.m., I made tea and sat on the back steps. Mud on my jeans, dirt under my nails, sun on my face. Nothing dramatic, nothing loud. But for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for anyone to walk in the door. Not a child, not a grandchild, not a neighbor with pity in her voice. I was simply sitting, in my house, in my life. I wasn't lonely. I was alone. And there's a difference. That weekend, I did something small but significant. I cleared the guest room. Not just cleaned it. I stripped it of its old identity. Took down the blackout curtains Laura always insisted on. Folded the high thread count sheets she brought for comfort. Packed up the extra phone charger, the humidifier, the set of floral towels she never used but always requested. Into a box they went. Every item a reminder of who that room had been for. And then I opened the window. Let in the light. The wallpaper was outdated. A soft green I once thought looked elegant now just made the room feel dim. I peeled back a corner, curious. The glue came off easier than expected. And just like that, I spent the next 2 hours tearing it all down with my bare hands. It felt rude, joyously rude, like I was scratching off a label that never belonged. Underneath was a surprise. Pale blue paint from decades ago. The color Derek picked when Dean was still in grade school. I ran my hand along it. It was chipped, faded, imperfect, and it felt more honest than anything that had been pasted on since. Later, I opened the closet, not to organize it, but to reclaim it. Inside were old storage bins full of things I hadn't touched in years. Board games with missing pieces, a scarf Laura once left and never asked about, a baby monitor from when Dean's family visited with the kids, even though I never let them sleep in a separate room from me. They never trusted my ears. I took out one of the bins and emptied it onto the floor. In the bottom was a worn envelope labeled "Someday." I remembered that handwriting, my own, 30 years ago. Inside were pages from an old magazine, ideas for a sewing nook I never built, patterns I never tried, swatches of fabric still folded into neat squares. I sat down on the floor, legs stiff, and spread them out. I used to dream about that. A room just for me. A quiet table, a good lamp, a wall shelf full of colored threads. I never made it happen. Life had other plans, or rather, other people's needs always came first. Until now. I measured the wall, not expertly, just enough to imagine where a small desk might go. I'd seen one online the other day, solid wood, not overpriced. I bookmarked it, but hadn't let myself click buy. That night, I did. I also ordered a lamp, a proper chair, a set of glass jars for buttons and needles and things I hadn't owned in years. It felt extravagant, reckless, and completely justified. I didn't tell anyone. No one asked anyway. The next morning, I called the local community center. A woman named Pamela answered. "Do you still run the Monday quilting group?" I asked. "We sure do," she said cheerfully. "You'd be the youngest one by about a decade, though." I laughed. "Sounds perfect." "Do you sew?" she asked. "Not yet," I said. "But I will." By Monday, the messages changed tone. Dean had gone from confusion to concern, and now, unmistakably, to frustration. The first voicemail of the morning. "Mom, I really think we should talk. It's been days." The second, a few hours later. "Okay, I don't know what you're trying to prove, but this is getting out of hand." He didn't say what, exactly, was out of hand. That I'd stopped answering? That I hadn't sent a birthday card to Milo, who turned 16 the day after they left? That I didn't fall into my usual routine of guilt and baking? There was a time I'd have rushed to make it right, dropped off a gift, called to sing the birthday song even if they put me on speaker and rolled their eyes. I used to think that was love. Now I'm not so sure. I didn't call, I didn't text. I went to the quilting group instead. The community center smelled like floor polish and old paper. The quilting room was smaller than I expected, with folding chairs, mismatched cushions, and a large table in the center covered in swatches and threads. There were 6 women already seated, most of them in their 70s or 80s. One of them, Agnes, had hearing aids and a lipstick color that defied nature. Another, B, wore a sweatshirt that read, "Retired but dangerous." I liked them immediately. Pamela, the coordinator, introduced me as Karen, new but determined. They nodded in welcome, like I'd passed some unspoken test. No one asked where I'd come from or what had brought me in. That was the kindness of their generation. Curiosity held gently, without prying. We talked about patterns, mistakes, hands that used to be steadier. We laughed more than I'd expected. When I admitted I hadn't sewn a thing in over 30 years, Agnes patted my arm and said, "Good. You won't have bad habits to unlearn." When I came home, there was a box on my porch. Dean's handwriting again. A small, neat package. Inside, a framed photo of the kids, one from last year's Christmas. Laura had probably chosen it. There was no note. I placed it on the table by the front door, stood there for a moment, then turned it face down. Not in anger, just honesty. They weren't smiling for me in that picture. They were smiling for the camera. That evening, the phone rang. This time I answered. Not Dean, Jessie. "Hi, Grandma," she said, cautious. "Are you mad at me?" I sat down. "No, sweetheart, I'm not mad. Dad says you're not talking to anyone, that you're upset." "I'm not talking to your parents right now," I said gently. "That's between us. You're not responsible for what they say or do." She was quiet for a moment. Then, did I do something wrong? And that hurt, that she would ask, that she didn't know. No, I said firmly. You didn't. But I need some space right now. I need people to treat me like I matter, not like wallpaper. She didn't fully understand. I could hear it in her silence. But she respected it. That was enough. After the call, I sat in the dark for a long time. No tears, just the hum of the refrigerator and the ache of a life being slowly rewritten. This wasn't a rebellion. It was restoration. On Wednesday, I called Marion. We hadn't spoken in a few weeks. Not out of distance, just the way time drifts when you're not looking. Marion was one of the few people who never asked for explanations, never counted favors. We met 30 years ago at a school fundraiser, bonded over burnt cookies and shared eye rolls, and stayed connected through widowhood, hospital visits, and every kind of silence in between. I didn't tell her everything over the phone, just invited her for tea. She showed up in her usual way, unannounced, right on time, carrying a paper bag with scones and wearing a scarf that looked like it belonged in a Paris window. Well, she said, stepping inside, either you've finally decided to redecorate or you've declared war. Which is it? I smiled. A little of both. She raised an eyebrow but didn't press. We sat at the kitchen table, the old one with a faded ring from Derek's coffee mug, still visible in the wood grain. I poured the tea, added the lemon, passed her a scone. Then I told her. Not all at once, not with dramatics, just the facts. The comment on Halloween, the silence at the table, the packing, the door closing behind them, the letter, the calls. My answer. Marion listened like she always had, chin slightly tilted, one hand around her cup, nodding now and then, her eyes never leaving mine. When I finished, she put her teacup down and said, simply, "Good." I blinked. Good? Karen, how long have I watched you cook for them, plan around them, walk on eggshells not to make Dean grumpy or Laura bored? I didn't answer. How long have you told me it's not worth a fight, or they don't mean it, or maybe next year will be different? Still, I stayed quiet. And how long, she continued, voice gentle now, have you swallowed the hurt and called it peace? That's when it hit me. It hadn't been peace. It had been surrender. They're not bad people, I said, the last thread of old loyalty fraying between my fingers. No, she agreed. They're just comfortable. And people who get too comfortable start to forget where the line is, especially if no one's ever drawn it. I looked at her, this woman with a laugh like a bark and a spine made of steel wrapped in velvet. You think I did the right thing? She reached across the table, took my hand. I think you remembered you have a name. That's always the right thing. We sat in silence for a bit, the kind of silence that settles instead of presses. Eventually, we moved to the living room. I showed her the cleared guest room, told her about the sewing nook, the quilting group, the blue paint under the wallpaper. She looked around the room, nodded once. You know what this house looks like now? What? Yours. That night, after she left, I stood at the window for a long time. The porch light cast a soft glow on the lawn. No cars, no noise, no one coming or going. Just the shape of my life, finally unshared. Not empty, full of me. I found the list by accident. It was tucked between old warranty papers and expired coupons in the drawer by the phone. A yellow notepad page, edges curled, ink faded. My handwriting, unmistakably mine, from a decade ago. Maybe more. At the top, underlined twice, it said, things I'd do someday. I stood there for a long time, holding it in both hands like it might crumble. The paper felt fragile. The ideas on it didn't. 1. Learn to paint. 2. Visit the Grand Canyon. 3. Take a dance class, not with Derek, he'd never agree. 4. Go to the theater alone, front row, buy the expensive seat. 5. Write something, doesn't matter what, just write. There were more, some sillier. Buy good cheese and don't feel guilty. Some sad. See Dean happy with his family. But I focused on the first 5. They felt like a woman trying to remember herself. I pinned the list to the inside of the pantry door. Not out in the open. Not yet. But somewhere I'd see it every day, every time I reached for tea or oatmeal. A quiet reminder. I'm still here. I'm still someone. That afternoon, I drove to the art supply store on Main. It had been there forever. I used to pass it on my way to the bank, always thinking, someday. Inside, the smell of wood and paper and possibility hit me like sunlight. I wandered slowly, unsure where to begin. A young man behind the counter, barely older than Milo, asked if I needed help. I'm looking for paint, I said. What kind? He asked. I paused. The kind that makes people brave. He smiled like he'd heard that before. I came home with a small starter set, a few brushes, and a pad of watercolor paper. That evening, I cleared a corner of the sewing nook table and dipped a brush in blue. My first attempt looked like a storm swallowed a flower and forgot to chew. But I didn't care. It was mine. The next day, I went to the post office again, not with letters this time, but with a ticket order. 2 passes to a local community theater show next month. I'd go alone. Sit in the front row. Buy the good seat. I wasn't planning on telling anyone, not Dean, not the kids, not even Marion. Not yet. This wasn't about being witnessed. It was about claiming air. And later that week, I opened a blank notebook and wrote a single sentence. She had spent so long being quiet, she forgot her voice had shape. I didn't know what it was, a poem, a memory, an opening line. But it was something, a beginning. That night, before bed, I looked at the pantry door. The list was still there, a little more wrinkled than yesterday, but more alive than it had been in years. I took a pen and placed a check mark next to number 1. It started with the curtains, not the dusty ones in the den. Those went last year. No, these were the heavy velvet drapes in the dining room. Laura picked them out 5 years ago during one of her home improvement phases. She said they made the room feel more elevated. They made it feel like a hotel lobby. I'd kept them because she liked them. I told myself they were practical, that they blocked the light well, that they were expensive. But the truth was simpler. They weren't mine, and I kept them anyway. That had been a pattern, a quiet one I was ready to end. I pulled them down without ceremony. The curtain rod protested. The brackets came loose, but I didn't stop. Behind them, the windows looked shocked, like eyes that hadn't been opened in years. I left them bare for now. Let the light pour in. Let the room be what it really was. Not elegant, but honest. That set something off. I moved to the hutch. Inside, the china set Dean and Laura gave me for Christmas one year. White, rimmed in gold, too delicate to ever touch. For display, she'd said. I'd used it twice. Not because I was afraid to break it, but because it never felt like it belonged here. I wrapped each piece carefully and packed it away in a box labeled, "Leave it." I opened the linen closet. Half the towels were from guest sets. picked by someone else, monogrammed with initials that weren't mine. Into the donation pile they went. In the bedroom, I found old picture frames with posed smiles and stiff shoulders. Ones where I could see, now, how much I'd tried to fit into corners. I didn't throw them out. I just took them down, replaced them with older ones. Sun-faded prints of Derek holding a garden hose, me in a windbreaker with my hair wild, laughing too hard to be graceful. I stood there looking at us, real us, and whispered, "There you are." In the garage, I discovered a box labeled for family visits. Inside, extra toothbrushes, unopened shampoo, board games no one ever played, plastic cups with cartoon characters long forgotten. I sat on the concrete floor, pulled the box into my lap, and sorted. Some things I kept, a deck of cards, a blanket Jessie loved as a toddler. But most of it I let go. Because I realized something. I'd spent years keeping a version of the house that wasn't mine, just in case they came back. A version of myself, too. Not anymore. That night, the house felt lighter. Not just physically, though the donation bags piled near the front door said otherwise, but emotionally. Like a room you'd finally exhaled in after holding your breath too long. I sat in my new sewing nook. The lamp cast a warm circle of light on the table. A square of fabric waited under the needle. My painting supplies rested nearby, still damp from the day's effort. The photo of Derek smiled down at me from the shelf. Just him. No cropping, no edits. There was no silence. Not really. The house was breathing with me. I realized then, I wasn't clearing space for someone to return. I was making room for someone who'd never really lived here before. Me. The message came late in the evening, just as I was folding fabric squares into a basket by the window. "Hi, Grandma. I know things have been weird. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. For not saying anything. For laughing, even a little. I didn't mean to. I think about that night a lot. Can I come see you? Just me. No one else. Milo. The one who never quite fit the family mold. Quieter than Jesse. Less polished than his parents wanted him to be. The same kid who once stayed up with me baking banana bread at midnight because he couldn't sleep without real food. He was 12 then. Maybe 13. I remembered the way he watched the oven like it was magic. I sat with the message for a while. My first instinct was to protect the silence I'd built like a fence. But this wasn't noise. It wasn't pressure. It wasn't even guilt. It was a boy, now nearly a man, trying to find his way back to something good. I typed slowly. "Thank you for saying that. You're welcome to come by. But only if you want to. And only if it's for you, not for them." He replied right away. "It is. It's just me. I want to talk. I've been thinking about some stuff." We agreed on Saturday afternoon. No plans. No expectations. Just tea. That morning, I made lemon bars, the way I used to when he was little, and laid out 2 mugs, not 4. He showed up alone, as promised. A little taller. Hair shaggier than I remembered. Hoodie sleeves pulled over his hands. When I opened the door, he looked nervous. "Hi," he said. "Hi," I said back. We stood for a moment in the doorway, then I stepped aside. "Come in." He walked in like someone visiting a museum. Cautious, wide-eyed, quiet. He looked around, took in the changes. The open dining room windows, the empty guest room, the sewing table. "It looks different," he said. "It is. I like it," he added, almost shyly. We sat at the kitchen table. I poured tea. He took a lemon bar and broke it into neat halves before tasting it. "I missed this," he said. Lemon? He smiled. You. We didn't talk about his parents. Not at first. Instead, we talked about his classes, his plans, how he wasn't sure if he wanted to go to college right away, how he felt like he was always being measured by standards he didn't help define. I listened. I didn't rush to advise or fix. I just let him talk. Let him breathe in the way I'd always wished someone had let me when I was younger and still learning how to carry silence. Eventually, he said it. I knew it was wrong, what Dad said that night. I just didn't know how to say anything. I nodded. That's fair. You're allowed to learn in your own time. He looked at me, eyes bright but steady. I want to be better than that. I don't want to grow up thinking it's normal to talk to people that way. Then don't, I said. Start here. I think I already have, he said softly. Before he left, I handed him a small package. A notebook, a real one, not digital. Blank pages, soft cover. What's this for? He asked. To write what you don't know how to say out loud yet. He nodded like he understood. As he walked down the porch steps, he turned back once. Grandma? Yes? I'm glad you kicked us out. I smiled. Me too. Milo came again the next Saturday. No message this time, just a knock on the door at 2:30. He held a small brown bag from the bakery on 5th and a shy smile like a peace offering. I brought those apple turnovers you used to like, he said. I still like them, I replied, stepping aside. Come in. He moved through the house like someone returning to a place they'd dreamed about. Tentative, respectful. Not that teenager stomp, not that lazy entitlement so many carry like second skin. He didn't even reach for his phone once. Just handed me the bag and asked if we could sit in the living room. We did. He looked at the room carefully. The bookshelf I'd reorganized. The new frame on the mantel, Derek, me, and Dean as a baby. One of the few pictures where none of us was performing. You changed the pictures, he said. I changed the story, I answered. He sat quietly for a moment, then reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out the notebook I'd given him last week. It was soft at the edges now, pages creased from use. That made me oddly proud. I wrote something, he said, opening to the middle. But I don't know if it's any good. That's never the point. He cleared his throat and read. Some people grow up in houses that feel like waiting rooms. Everything's polite, clean, and temporary. You're always dressed for someone else's expectations. But then, you visit someone like Grandma, and suddenly, you're in a house that breathes. Not always tidy, not always silent, but honest. And that makes you want to live different. I didn't speak right away. I didn't trust my voice. He looked up. Too much? It's perfect, I said. Because it's true. He nodded, then looked down again. I didn't come to read, though. I came because, well, I think they want me to say something. Your parents? Yeah. He paused. They keep asking if you're still mad, if you've calmed down, if I can gauge your mood, like I'm some sort of translator. I almost laughed. And what do you tell them? I tell them you're doing fine, better than fine. That's accurate. I think they're scared, he added. Not of you, exactly, but of what happens when you stop needing them. That happened a long time ago, I said. They just didn't notice. Milo shifted on the couch, leaning forward slightly. They think if you forgive them, everything goes back to normal. There's no going back, I said. And I don't want normal. He looked up. What do you want, Grandma? I answered without thinking. I want respect without having to bleed for it. I want love that doesn't come wrapped in guilt. I want to stop explaining my worth to people who only remember it when they need something. Milo didn't flinch. He just nodded slowly. I think they should hear that. They're not ready to hear it, and I'm not responsible for when they are. He reached for his tea, took a slow sip, then said something that surprised me. Can I keep coming anyway? Just me, even if they don't change? I smiled, soft and tired and honest. Please do. He stayed a little longer that time. We didn't talk about family anymore. We talked about music, books he hated in school but secretly liked, how scared he was of failing college algebra. And then, right before he left, he said something I'd remember for a long time. You always saw me, Grandma, even when I didn't know how to be seen. I walked him to the door, and when it closed behind him, I didn't feel the old ache of being left behind. I felt like someone had finally stayed. He didn't call first. He just showed up. It was a Thursday afternoon, cold enough to wear gloves, but not cold enough for snow. I was in the backyard, pruning back what was left of the roses, when I heard the car door slam. The sound brought back 100 memories, some soft, some sharp. For a second, I thought it might be Milo again, but no. The steps were heavier, slower, more entitled. I turned and saw Dean walking up the driveway, hands in his coat pockets, mouth tight. He didn't wave, just said, "Hi, Mom," like we'd spoken yesterday. I stood still. "What are you doing here?" "I thought we could talk," he said. "No," I said. "You thought you could control the conversation better if you showed up." He blinked. The old tactics never worked on me for long, but he always tried them again, just in case I'd softened. This time, I hadn't. "I brought coffee," he added, as if that might count for something. I didn't move from the rose bush. He stepped closer. "Look, this has gone far enough. We can't go the rest of our lives not speaking." "We've gone plenty of years not really speaking," I said, brushing a thorn from my glove. He shifted his weight, trying for casual. "I know you were upset. I get that. But don't you think this reaction has been a little dramatic?" And there it was. That word again. "Dramatic," I repeated. "Come on," he said. "You kicked us out over a joke. The kids—" I turned then, full, still. And when I spoke, my voice didn't rise. It didn't shake. "You insulted me in my own kitchen, in front of your children. You made a joke at my expense, and then you all laughed like I wasn't even there. And now you stand here, not to apologize, but to manage the fallout." Dean opened his mouth, closed it, then looked around the yard like it might give him an out. "This was never about one comment," I continued. "This was about years. Years of visits that felt like obligations. Years of you walking through my door like it was a checkpoint. Years of your wife rearranging my home like it wasn't good enough for her curated lifestyle." He shifted again, this time uncomfortably. "Laura didn't mean anything by it. I don't care what she meant. I care how I felt. And you never asked." He stared at me. "So what? You just cut us off?" "No," I said. "I stopped cutting myself open to make room for people who only see me when I bleed." That hit. I saw it land. His jaw clenched, his eyes dropped. "Milo's been coming by," I said. "He came on his own. He apologized, not just for what happened, but for what he didn't say. And he listened." Dean said nothing. "You haven't called because you care. You called because you're losing control of the story. You think if you can smooth this over, everything goes back to how it was." He lifted his eyes. "Can't it?" "No," I said, "because I finally see that how it was wasn't enough." We stood in silence, just wind and dead leaves, and the brittle sound of branches clicking against each other. Then, softly, "So what now?" "Now," I said, "you figure out who you are without me carrying your guilt for you. You stop pretending your charm excuses your disrespect. And you learn what real repair looks like. Not convenience, not money, not a surprise coffee on a weekday." "I didn't mean to hurt you," he said, almost a whisper. "But you did," I said, "and you didn't care until it cost you something." He exhaled. "I miss you. You miss the version of me that didn't speak up." He looked down again, nodded once, like maybe, just maybe, he was hearing it for the first time. "Can I come in?" "No," I said. "Not today." "Will there be a day?" "That's not up to me anymore," I said. "That's up to who you decide to become." I turned back to the roses. Dean stood there a few more seconds, then walked back to his car. He didn't slam the door this time. He just drove off. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel left behind. I felt like I'd stayed exactly where I needed to be. The office was quiet, paneled in that old honey-colored wood no one uses anymore. The chairs creaked softly. The windows were thick, the kind that make you feel sealed away from the world. I liked it. It gave decisions the weight they deserved. My lawyer, Mr. Gardner, was kind. Older than Dean, younger than me. Sharp in the eyes but soft around the edges. We'd met after Derek passed, back when I still thought I'd leave everything exactly as it was, because it felt safer that way. Fairer. But fair, I've come to learn, isn't the same as good, and it certainly isn't the same as earned. "I'd like to amend the will," I told him. "Not out of spite, just clarity." He nodded. "Of course, Karen. You don't need to justify anything to me. It's your estate. Your voice." I handed him the paper I'd written that morning. It wasn't angry. It was clean, calm, simple. A breakdown of where I wanted things to go. The house, the savings, the small cottage up north. Derek never got to finish fixing. I'd left Dean's name on some things, but not all. Not the home. Not the heart of it. The house would go to a community housing fund for elder women, through a nonprofit I'd been quietly supporting for years. The sewing nook, the garden, the room with the blue walls. They'd become sanctuary, not storage. And the savings? Split. Milo, if he stayed who he was becoming. A local art school with a scholarship under my name. And Marion, because she'd seen me before I saw myself. Dean would receive something, of course, but not everything. Not by default. Mr. Gardner read the paper slowly, his lips moving as he scanned the lines. When he finished, he looked up with a small, surprised smile. "You've thought this through," he said. "I've lived it through," I answered. We made the changes. Signed, stamped, filed. No drama. No whispers of revenge, just the clean, hard truth of putting down what mattered. And who mattered. Afterwards, I walked home instead of calling a cab. The cold didn't bother me. It sharpened the edges of the day, made everything feel more alive. At one point, I passed a row of shops, their windows decorated with early winter garlands. In one, a red wool coat hung on a headless mannequin, bold, soft, elegant. I stepped inside and tried it on. It fit. Not perfectly. I've earned a body shaped by years of service, of shrinking, of surviving. But it sat on me like I'd never borrowed anything, like I'd come to claim something that had been waiting. I bought it. When I got home, I hung it by the door. No tags, no receipts, no plan to return. Later, I sat in my chair by the window, tea in hand, the sewing lamp glowing behind me. The legal papers were filed. The house was quiet. The garden slept under its frost. For the first time, I allowed myself to feel something I hadn't felt in decades, that I had done something irreversible, and that it was exactly right. Winter came softly. No storms, no sharp turns, just the slow settling of frost over the roof, the crunch of salt on the front steps, the smell of wood smoke from chimneys up and down the street. I didn't decorate the house this year, not because I was bitter, just because I didn't want to. Instead, I lit one candle every night, same time, same windowsill, no garlands, no glitter, just flame and quiet. Milo came by once a week, no pattern, no obligation, just a boy with questions and a notebook. He never stayed too long, always took off his shoes, always brought something small, tea, bread, once a book he thought I might like. I always made room for him, not because I had to, because I wanted to. Sometimes we talked about his parents, not often. He'd mention how Dean still avoided the subject, how Laura pretended it had all blown over, how the house felt tighter now, like no one wanted to say the thing that was stuck between them. I never asked for details. I didn't need them. I'd lived in that silence long enough to know its texture. One evening, not long before Christmas, Milo lingered after tea. "They're not doing great," he said. "Dad's different. Quiet. Mom's mad all the time." "They'll figure it out," I said. "Or they won't." He studied me, then asked what I knew was coming. "Would you ever let them come back?" I looked at him for a long moment. "Not as they were." He nodded. "I think that's fair." The following Sunday, Marion and I went to the theater. Front row, no discount tickets. I wore the red coat. She wore something sparkly and entirely inappropriate for her age, which was exactly right. We laughed at the wrong parts, cried when no one else did, ordered dessert at intermission. When she dropped me off, she kissed my cheek and said, "You're not invisible anymore." "I never was," I said. "I just stopped reminding them." The week after, I painted again. Nothing dramatic, just color, shapes, a storm without a name. I liked it enough to hang it in the hallway, right where the photo of Dean's perfect family used to be. I got fewer voicemails now. Dean stopped calling altogether. I didn't chase it. Milo still came. That was enough. One morning in early January, I woke to sunlight on the bedroom ceiling and a strange stillness in my chest. Not dread, not grief. Peace. The kind that doesn't ask for permission. The kind that says, "You've done enough now." I sat in my chair by the window, tea in hand, paint on my fingers, the red coat on its hook. The candle burned low beside me. I wasn't young again. I wasn't healed in every place, but I was whole. That's something I never thought I'd get to be. So if you've ever sat at a table where your voice wasn't welcome, if you've ever cooked for people who forgot to say thank you, if you've ever looked in the mirror and not seen yourself, only service, silence, survival, know this: you're not too late. You're not too loud. You're not wrong to want more. Draw the line. Take the seat. Reclaim the room. And if this story felt like yours, even a little, leave a comment. Tell me what you remembered, what you let go, what you took back. We're not finished. We're just finally starting.